You bought a hotel with my money, and your wife and mother-in-law are going to live in it, I said, staring straight into my son-in-law's eyes. My voice trembled, but not from fear. Oh no, it was anger that shook through me like thunder. He tried to laugh it off, shifting in his chair as though it was a joke I didn't understand. But I wasn't joking. My daughter sat beside him, her head bowed, hands clasped so tightly together I thought her fingers would break. I picked up my phone. My fingers shook, but my heart was steady. I pressed a number, placed the phone on the table, and hit the speaker button. The line rang once.
Twice.
Then it connected. "Hello," came the voice on the other end. The moment that voice filled the room, my daughter's face turned pale like paper. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at me with eyes that begged me to stop, but it was already too late. And that, dear viewers, is where the story begins. Before I take you deeper into the events that led to this very moment, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Grandma Maggie. I'm 68 years old, and I'm speaking to you right now from Dallas, Texas, here in the United States of America. I've lived a long life filled with laughter, tears, and plenty of surprises. But nothing prepared me for what my own flesh and blood would do to me. Now, before we continue, I'd like to remind you, please subscribe to this channel, click the like button, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next parts of this story. Trust me, what you're about to hear will shock you to your core. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I always love to know which part of the country my dear viewers are tuning in. Alright, let's go back to the beginning so you can understand how we reached this point where my daughter turned pale and I was forced to put that call on speaker. It all started 2 years ago, after my husband passed away. He was my high school sweetheart, and we had been married for over 40 years. Losing him felt like someone ripped my heart right out of my chest. For months, I couldn't even leave the house. The silence of our home was unbearable. Every corner reminded me of him, the smell of his old jackets, the sound of his favorite chair creaking when I sat in it, the garden he loved tending to. My daughter, Susan, would come to visit often. She'd bring her husband, David, and sometimes their 2 children. Their visits brightened my world, and I clung to those moments like a lifeline. Susan would hug me tightly and say, "Mom, we'll take care of you. Don't worry." Back then, I believed her. I had some savings. My husband and I had worked hard all our lives, and though we weren't millionaires, we had put away enough to live comfortably in our old age. After his death, I became the sole owner of our small fortune. My retirement fund, the house, and some other assets. At first, David seemed so supportive. He'd offer to fix things around the house, cut the grass, and drive me to doctor's appointments. He called me Mom with a wide smile, and I thought, what a blessing Susan married such a caring man. But as months passed, his kindness started to feel calculated. He began talking more and more about investments, about how money shouldn't just sit doing nothing. "Mom," he'd say, "with the right investment you could double or triple what you have. Think about your grandchildren's future. Don't you want to leave them something bigger?" At first, I shrugged it off. I told him I didn't need anything bigger, that my simple life was enough. But David was persistent. And Susan, oh, Susan. She started echoing his words. "Mom, maybe David's right. Maybe this is what Dad would have wanted, for you to help us build something for the family." It felt wrong. My husband and I had always planned to keep our money safe, for emergencies, for the children after we were gone, not for risky business schemes. But when your own daughter stands beside her husband, looking at you with pleading eyes, it's hard to say no. So, against my better judgment, I gave them access to part of my savings. Not all of it, but enough to make me uneasy. They promised it would be used wisely, that I'd see the results soon. And for a while, I let myself believe them. I told myself they loved me, that they'd never betray me. But oh, how wrong I was. Months later, whispers began reaching me through neighbors and church friends. People mentioned seeing Susan and David at a new hotel in town, smiling, giving tours, acting like they owned the place. I brushed it off. I thought maybe they were just visiting. But when I finally went to see it for myself, my heart nearly stopped. There it was. A grand, shiny hotel with David's name on the business license. The money they had begged for me had gone straight into this venture. And not just that, they had moved into the hotel, with Susan's mother-in-law living right there in one of the top suites. I felt the betrayal like a knife in my chest. My money, my trust, my love, all taken to build a kingdom where I had no place. But instead of screaming that very day, I kept quiet. I gathered my strength. I waited for the right moment. And when I finally confronted them at Susan's house, the truth spilled out. You bought a hotel with my money, and your wife and mother-in-law are going to live in it. I asked. David stammered, Susan wept, and I knew I needed proof, so I picked up my phone. And when that voice on the line spoke, Susan's face drained of all color. That's when I realized the truth was even darker than I had imagined. But before I tell you what the voice on the phone revealed, you need to understand everything that led up to this call. Because this story, it has twists you won't see coming. That day in Susan's living room was just the beginning. The weeks before had been filled with strange moments, like the time David accidentally left a folder on the table and I saw contracts with my signature forged on them. Or the night Susan avoided my calls when I was sick, only to later say she was busy at the hotel. And then there was the envelope that arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, only a single sheet of paper with one line. Ask your daughter who really owns the hotel. I didn't understand it at first, but the moment I made that phone call and Susan's face went pale, I knew the message had been the truth. And what happened next? Well, it changed everything. Because right as the voice on the other end began to speak, something crashed outside the house. A sound so loud it shook the windows. We all froze. That was the moment when everything shifted again. The crash outside was so loud it felt like the walls of Susan's house rattled. My heart jumped into my throat. For a moment, we all just stared at each other in silence, listening to the echo fade. David was the first to move. He rushed to the window, pulling the curtain aside. What in the world? He muttered. His face went pale, almost as white as Susan's had been moments earlier. I clutched my phone tightly, the voice on the other end still saying, "Hello? Hello? Margaret, are you there?" But I couldn't answer.
Not yet.
Susan stood up slowly, her hands trembling. "What was that, David?" she asked, her voice cracking. David didn't reply immediately. He just kept staring out the window. Then he turned to us and whispered, "It's your car, Mom." My stomach dropped. My car? I hurried to the window myself, and there it was, my old Buick, the one my husband had bought me years ago, sitting in the driveway, or at least it had been. Now the back window was smashed to pieces. A brick lay on the ground beside it, and a piece of paper was tied to the brick with string. Susan gasped. Who would do that? But I already knew this wasn't some random act. No, this was connected. Whoever had sent that anonymous note in my mailbox, whoever had warned me about the hotel, they were sending me another message. I turned back to the phone still on speaker. "Are you hearing this?" I asked the voice on the other end. "Yes," came the calm reply. "And it's exactly why I told you to call me. Margaret, you're in more danger than you realize. Don't trust anyone in that room." The words cut deep. My daughter looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. "Mom, what is going on? Who is that on the phone?" But I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Not until I was sure of the truth. David, clearly shaken, walked to the door. "I'm going outside to check," he muttered.
No.
I snapped. My voice came out louder than I intended, but I didn't care. Something told me if he stepped outside right then, it wouldn't just be the car that got smashed. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the faint buzzing of the phone line. Then the voice on the other end spoke again, slow and steady. "Margaret, listen to me carefully. That hotel isn't just a hotel. And your money isn't the only thing they took." Before I could ask what that meant, a sudden pounding rattled the front door. 3 sharp knocks, boom.
Boom. Boom.
Susan screamed. David froze mid-step. My heart thudded, so loud, I thought it would burst out of my chest. And then a voice from outside shouted through the door. Low, commanding, dangerous. Open up. We know you're in there. The pounding on the door shook the whole house again.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
Open up. We know you're in there. The voice was deep, rough, the kind that carried authority or menace. Susan let out a cry and grabbed my arm. Mom, don't open it. David stood frozen in the middle of the room, his face twitching between fear and defiance. He looked like a man torn between running out the back door or standing his ground. I picked up the phone from the table, my thumb hovering over the button to end the call, but the voice on the other end spoke firmly. Margaret, keep me on the line. Don't hang up. This is exactly what I feared. Who are they? I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. The pounding came again.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
This time it was followed by the sound of fists hitting the door harder, rattling the frame. David finally spoke, his voice shaking. It's probably just a mistake. Maybe kids playing a prank. Kids don't throw bricks through car windows. I snapped back, my anger cutting through my fear. The pounding stopped suddenly. The silence was worse. We all stared at the door, waiting, holding our breaths. Then came the sound of a voice, lower this time, almost a growl. You can hide for now, but we'll be back. Tell David, he knows what this is about. My head whipped around. What do they mean, David? What do you know about this? David's eyes darted around like a trapped animal. I don't know what they're talking about. But his voice betrayed him. He was lying, and he knew it. Susan turned to him, panic written all over her face. David, what have you gotten us into? Before he could answer, the sound of a car engine roared outside. Tires screeched against the pavement, and then silence. Whoever they were gone.
For now.
I lowered the phone slowly, but the voice on the other end cut through again. Margaret, I need you to listen very carefully. Those men aren't finished. They'll be back, and next time, they won't just be knocking. Susan burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. David just sank into the couch, his head in his hands. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked completely broken. I tightened my grip on the phone. Tell me everything, I demanded. Tell me what's going on, or I swear. The voice interrupted. You need to get out of that house. Right now. But where would we go? I asked, glancing at Susan and David. That hotel, the voice said calmly. The one they bought with your money. That's where you'll find the answers. But be careful, it's not just about money. It's much bigger than that. The line went dead. Susan looked at me, her face streaked with tears. Mom, who was that? Who did you call? I hesitated. For a long moment, I debated telling her the truth. But something inside me whispered that she wasn't ready. Not yet. An old friend, I said instead. Someone who knows more than you think. David jumped up suddenly, pacing the room. We can't go to the hotel, he muttered. Not now. Not tonight. It's too dangerous. Dangerous? I shot back. David, you've lied enough. If you don't start talking, I'll walk out that door myself and find out the truth. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his face pale and sweaty. You don't understand, he whispered. These people, they're not just investors. They're dangerous men. I thought I could handle them, but he cut himself off, biting his lip. Susan grabbed his arm, shaking him. What do you mean, David? What have you done? His voice broke. I borrowed more than just your money, Margaret. I promised them returns I couldn't deliver. The hotel isn't just ours. It belongs to them now. And if I don't pay them back, they'll... He stopped again, unable to finish. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My money was gone. But worse, my family was caught in something darker than I'd imagined. David, I said coldly, you've dragged Susan and those children into danger. And you used my trust to do it. But listen to me, I will not let you destroy this family. Before he could answer, another sound pierced the night, the sharp cry of glass breaking. We all turned toward the kitchen. A rock had smashed through the window, landing on the tiled floor, with a heavy thud. Wrapped around it was another piece of paper. Susan screamed. David rushed to pick it up, but I snatched it from his hand first. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the note. The words were scrawled in thick black ink. Tomorrow. Midnight. Bring the money, or we take the hotel and your family. I felt my knees weaken. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. David looked at the note, his lips trembling. They mean it, he whispered. They'll kill us if we don't do what they say. Susan collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there in silence, staring at the note, my mind racing. I had always believed in one thing. Family comes first. But what do you do when your own family betrays you and drags you into danger? What do you do when the money you worked your whole life for turns into a curse? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for certain. If I wanted to save my daughter, my grandchildren, and even that foolish man she married, I would need to face the men behind that note. I folded the paper, slipped it into my pocket, and lifted my chin. Then tomorrow, I said firmly, we give them what they're asking for, but on my terms. David stared at me like I had grown another head. What do you mean? I met his eyes. I'm not walking into their trap blindly. If they want to play games, then they'll see I'm not just some old woman they can push around. Susan looked at me, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. Mom, what are you planning? I took a deep breath. Something I should have done the moment I found out about that hotel. And just as the words left my mouth, the front door creaked. Slowly, quietly, someone was opening it from the outside. The creak of the front door froze us all in place. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever it was hadn't knocked this time, they were already inside. David moved toward the door, his fists clenched, but I grabbed his arm. Don't, I hissed. Wait. The door inched open wider. A shadow fell across the floor, stretching toward us like a black hand. Susan clutched my sleeve, trembling. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. Then a figure stepped inside. It wasn't the rough-looking men I had imagined. It wasn't even someone unfamiliar. It was a young boy, maybe 17 at most, with messy hair and fear written all over his face. He shut the door behind him quickly and pressed his back against it, panting. What are you doing here? David barked, his voice louder than it should have been. The boy's eyes darted to David, then to me. They sent me, he said, his voice cracking. I was supposed to watch the house, to make sure you didn't call anyone. Susan gasped. Watch the house? Who are they? The boy swallowed hard. The men. The ones who own the hotel now. His gaze shifted back to me. But I'm not here to hurt you, ma'am. I swear. I just wanted to warn you. I stepped closer, narrowing my eyes. Warn us about what? He hesitated, wringing his hands. They're not going to wait until tomorrow. They're coming tonight. Midnight was just to scare you. They already know you don't have the money. The room went silent. Susan shook her head violently. No, this can't be happening. David's face drained of all color. Tonight, he whispered. They'll kill us. The boy nodded, his voice low. They don't care about you. They just want to send a message. If you don't give them what they want, they'll take everything, including your lives. My hands trembled, but I stood tall. What's your name, son? Ethan, he muttered, staring at the floor. I put a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, if you really want to help, then you'll tell me everything. Who are these men? Why are they after my family? Before he could answer, a sudden noise shattered the fragile silence, the sound of tires screeching outside. Headlights flashed through the window, bright and blinding. Ethan's eyes widened in terror. It's them, he whispered. They're here. Susan screamed. David cursed under his breath. My heart raced. And then came the sound that made my blood run cold, the front gate crashing open. Heavy footsteps pounded toward the house. They hadn't waited until midnight. They were already here. The pounding footsteps grew louder, heavier, until they rattled against the porch. Susan clutched my arms so tightly her nails dug into my skin. David looked like a man about to faint, pacing back and forth like a trapped rat. Ethan's face was pale as a ghost. "You have to hide," he whispered urgently. "If they find you, it's over." But I shook my head.
No.
Running never solved anything. If they came for me, then I'll face them. The front door rattled violently as someone tried the handle. The sound of men's voices filled the air outside, low, harsh, full of authority. "Open up," one of them shouted. "We know you're in there." Susan broke into tears again, clutching at me. "Mom, don't. Please don't open it." David turned toward me, his voice cracking. "She's right. Don't do anything stupid. Let's just hide until they go away." I glared at him. "David, you've hidden long enough. It's your lies that brought them here. If I keep hiding, it'll cost us more than just money." Ethan stepped forward suddenly, pulling a small folded paper out of his pocket. His hands shook as he handed it to me. "This is why I came," he said. "I wasn't supposed to give this to you until later, but you need to see it now." I unfolded the paper quickly, my eyes scanning the words. My heart sank. It wasn't just another threat.
It was a contract.
A contract with David's forged signature and mine. It claimed that I, Margaret, had willingly invested all of my assets into the hotel, handing over not only money but also my house as collateral. My house. My only safe place. I gasped. "David, what is this?" David's face went red, then pale. He stammered. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You forged my signature?" My voice came out like a whip, sharp and shaking with rage. Susan turned on him, her face filled with betrayal. "David, how could you?" Before he could answer, the door shook violently again.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
This time, the wood splintered. "They're breaking in?" Susan screamed. Ethan darted toward the kitchen. "There's a back door. You have to get out now." But before any of us could move, the front door burst open with a deafening crack. 3 men stormed inside. They were tall, broad, dressed in dark jackets. Their faces were hard, eyes cold, the kind of men who had no patience for excuses. The leader, an older man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward first. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on me. "So," he said, his voice like gravel, "this is Margaret, the woman who thinks she can play games with us." Susan whimpered. David backed up, his hands raised. Ethan pressed himself against the wall, trembling. I forced myself to stand tall, even as fear squeezed my chest. "You stole my money. You tricked my family. And now you dare to come into my house." The scarred man smirked. "Your money was an investment, sweetheart. Bad deals happen every day. But your son-in-law here," he jabbed a thumb at David, "promised us more. Promised us things he can't deliver. And when men like us don't get what we're owed, well," his smirk widened, "we collect in other ways." He turned to Susan, his eyes narrowing. "Pretty little family you've got here. Shame if something happened to them." Susan screamed and clung to me. My blood boiled. "Leave them out of this," I snapped. "This is between me and David." The scarred man laughed. "You think you're in control, Grandma?
No.
You've already lost." He snapped his fingers. The 2 men behind him moved forward, grabbing David by the arms. David struggled, shouting, "Wait. I'll get you the money. I promise." The scarred man leaned close to me, his voice dropping low. "Tomorrow.
Noon.
You bring every last cent you have.
Cash.
If you don't, we'll take more than just the hotel." His eyes flicked toward Susan. "Understand." My fists clenched. "You'll regret this." He chuckled. "We don't regret anything." With that, he motioned to his men, and they shoved David hard into a chair. Then, as suddenly as they had come, they turned and walked out, slamming the broken door behind them. Their footsteps faded into the night, leaving only silence and fear behind. Susan rushed to David, sobbing. "What have you done to us?" David buried his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide. "You can't give them the money, ma'am." Even if you do, they won't stop. They'll just keep taking more. I knew he was right. Those men weren't businessmen. They were predators. And predators never stop until you fight back. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and said the words that shocked everyone in the room. Then tomorrow, we don't pay them. We fight them. Susan gasped. Mom, are you crazy? They'll kill us. I looked her in the eye, my voice steady. If we don't stand up now, Susan, we'll spend the rest of our lives living in fear. I won't let that happen to you, or to my grandchildren. Ethan nodded quickly. She's right. I know people who can help. People who've been waiting for a chance to take these men down. Susan looked at him in disbelief. You? You're just a kid. Ethan lifted his chin. I'm more than that. They forced me into working for them, but I've been gathering information. I can prove what they're doing. I just need someone brave enough to help me. I put a hand on his shoulder. Then you've found the right person. Susan shook her head in terror. Mom, this isn't you. You're just grandma. You're not some fighter. I looked at her, my jaw set. You're wrong. I've spent my whole life protecting this family. And if it means fighting back against men like that, then I'll do it. David finally looked up, his face pale and broken. They'll kill us all. I leaned down, glaring into his eyes. They might, David. But if they do, it'll be because of your lies. And I won't let your mistakes bury this family. Not without a fight. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. There's something you need to see. Something at the hotel. If we go there tonight, before they expect us, we might have the upper hand. My heart raced. It was dangerous, reckless, maybe even suicidal. But I knew we couldn't just wait around for those men to come back. I nodded firmly. Then, tonight, we go to the hotel. And just as I said it, the sound of breaking glass echoed again, this time from upstairs. Someone else was already inside the house. The shatter of glass from upstairs froze us all. It wasn't the front door this time, it was inside. Someone else had broken in. Susan clutched my arm, trembling. Mom, they're back. Ethan's eyes darted toward the staircase.
No.
If it was them, they'd storm down here right away. This is different. David stood, his voice shaking. We need to get out of here, now. I held up a hand. No sudden moves. We don't know who it is yet. The floorboards above us creaked. Slow.
Steady.
Each step made the silence heavier. Whoever it was wasn't in a rush. They were searching. Ethan whispered, Stay here. I'll check. Before I could stop him, the boy crept toward the stairs, moving quietly like a shadow. Susan covered her mouth to stifle a sob. I gripped the broken note in my pocket, my pulse racing. Ethan disappeared up the stairs. Seconds stretched like hours. Then came a muffled sound, his voice. Grandma, you need to come see this. My stomach dropped. I stood, ignoring Susan's desperate tug on my sleeve. Stay here, I told her, though my own legs trembled as I climbed the steps. The hallway upstairs smelled of dust and cold night air. A bedroom window had been smashed, glass scattered across the floor. And there, taped to the wall above the bed, was a single photograph. It was a picture of me. Not from long ago, this was recent. Me at the grocery store last week, pushing a cart. Me on my porch, watering the flowers. Me sitting in church, head bowed in prayer. Someone had been watching me. My knees almost buckled. Dear Lord, I whispered. Ethan's face was pale. They're not just after money. They've been tracking you for weeks. Maybe months. Behind me, Susan's voice quivered. She had followed despite my warning. Mom, what does this mean? Before I could answer, Ethan reached under the bed and pulled out a small black bag. He opened it and my blood turned cold. Inside were ropes, duct tape, and a knife. Susan gasped. They were planning to take you. The floor creaked again, this time behind us. We spun around. A man stood at the end of the hallway, his face hidden beneath a hood. His hand tightened around a crowbar, his eyes locked on me. He stepped forward slowly, the crowbar scraping the wall as he walked. Ethan moved in front of me, his arms spread. Run, he whispered. Both of you.
Now.
But I didn't move. I met the hooded man's eyes, my fear twisting into anger. "Why are you after me?" I demanded. The man tilted his head, his voice low and chilling. "Because you're the key, Margaret. Without you, none of this works." The hooded man's words chilled me to the bone. "Because you're the key, Margaret. Without you, none of this works." Susan whimpered behind me. Ethan stiffened, standing like a barrier between us, though I could see the tremor in his hands. I narrowed my eyes at the man. "What do you mean, the key? Speak clearly." He tilted his head, as if amused by my defiance. The crowbar scraped along the wall again, the sound sharp and grating. "The money, the hotel, the contracts, it all points back to you. Your name, your signature. Without your approval, the deal collapses." My chest tightened. "So that's why you forged my name?" The man chuckled. "Forged? No, Margaret. It wasn't forged. You signed it. You just don't remember." The blood drained from my face. "Lies." He stepped closer, his eyes glinting under the hood. "You were grieving. Vulnerable. They put papers in front of you, told you it was insurance, maybe some release forms for the bank. You signed. We watched you. We knew it would be easy." Susan shook her head furiously. No, my mom would never." But his words dug at me. I remembered those days, the blur after my husband's death. Susan and David visiting, bringing papers, saying things about transfers and just routine. Had I?
No.
I refused to believe it. I raised my chin. Even if that's true, it doesn't give you the right to destroy my family. The man sneered. "Your family destroyed themselves." David thought he was clever, thought he could outsmart us. But the truth is, Margaret, you were always the prize. You're the one with the assets. The one with the house, the account, the history. Without you, the whole operation falls apart. That's why you're the key. His words sank like lead into my chest. All this chaos because of me, my trust, my blindness. Ethan spoke up suddenly, his voice sharp. "If she's the key, then why threaten her? You need her alive." The hooded man smirked. "Alive, yes, but compliant. Fear makes people sign papers faster." He took another step forward. Susan cried out, clinging to me. "Please don't hurt us." Something snapped inside me then. Enough. Enough of being afraid. Enough of being tricked. I stepped around Ethan, facing the hooded man head-on. "Listen to me. I may be old, but I am not weak. You think you can scare me into silence? You're wrong. You want my money? My house? My name? Then you're going to have to fight harder than that." The man's smirk faded, replaced by something darker. He lifted the crowbar, gripping it tight. Then so be it. Before he could move, Ethan lunged. He shoved the man hard against the wall, the crowbar clattering to the floor. The hallway erupted in chaos, grunts, shouts, Susan screaming. I grabbed Susan's hand. "Run!" We stumbled back down the stairs, my knees aching with every step. Behind us, I heard the struggle, the thud of fists, the scrape of shoes. Ethan's voice cried out, then the hooded man's angry growl. At the bottom of the stairs, David stood frozen, wide-eyed. "What's happening?" "No time," I snapped. "We have to leave now." We rushed toward the back door, but before we could reach it, Ethan tumbled down the stairs, hitting the ground with a painful thud. He groaned, clutching his side. The hooded man appeared at the top of the staircase, his face still hidden, but his posture unshaken. He slowly descended, step by step, like a predator stalking prey. Susan sobbed. David finally moved, rushing to grab Ethan and drag him toward us. I grabbed a kitchen chair and raised it, my hands trembling but firm. The man laughed softly. "You really think a chair will stop me?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "But it'll slow you down." For a moment, the world seemed to stop, just his heavy steps, Susan's muffled sobs, Ethan's ragged breaths. Then the man lunged. I swung the chair with all my strength. It cracked against the crowbar wielder's shoulder, knocking him sideways. Ethan scrambled to his feet, blood on his lip but fire in his eyes.
Go, he shouted.
We bolted for the back door, bursting out into the cool night air. The yard was dark, shadows stretching across the grass. My smashed car sat in the driveway, glass glittering like ice under the moonlight. We didn't stop running until we reached the edge of the street. My chest burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't let go of Susan's hand. David stumbled beside us, dragging Ethan. "Where now?" he gasped. I turned, staring at the hotel lights glowing in the distance. "There," I said firmly. "If we're the key, then the answers are waiting inside those walls." Ethan wiped blood from his mouth, nodding. "We'll need proof. We'll need everything they've been hiding. If we get it, we can bring them down." But before we could move another step, the roar of an engine cut through the night. Headlights flared, blinding us. A black SUV screeched to a stop just feet away. The doors flew open. More men in dark jackets spilled out, blocking the road. The hooded man stepped out of the passenger seat, crowbar in hand, his hood slipping back just enough for me to see the scars slashing across his jaw. He pointed the crowbar at me.
"Game over, Grandma."
"You're coming with us." The black SUV's headlights cut through the night, trapping us like animals in a cage. I shielded my eyes, but the outline of men in dark jackets stepping out was unmistakable. There were at least 4 of them, maybe 5.
Too many.
The hooded man lowered his crowbar, his scar catching the moonlight. "Game over, Grandma," he said, his voice steady and cruel. "You're coming with us." Susan clung to me so tight her nails dug into my skin. "Mom, please don't let them." "Quiet," the man snapped, his eyes never leaving mine. "You've caused enough trouble already." David tried to step forward, his fists clenched, but his voice cracked. "Leave her alone. You don't need her." The scarred man laughed. "On the contrary, she's the only one we need." Ethan, blood still on his lip, leaned against David for balance. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "If you want her, you'll have to get through me first." The man smirked, amused. Brave words from a boy who can barely stand. He motioned to his men.
"Take them."
"All of them. We don't want witnesses." The men began to move in, their heavy boots crunching the gravel. My pulse raced. Think, Margaret.
Think.
Running wasn't an option. Fighting would be suicide. Then my eyes flicked toward the hotel in the distance, its neon sign glowing faintly against the dark. A crazy idea sparked. I raised my voice, firm and clear. "If you take me now, the police will know exactly where to look. My neighbor saw me leave tonight.
My pastor knows I was meeting with family."
"You think you can hide me? You'll bring them straight to your hotel." The men hesitated, glancing at each other. The scarred man narrowed his eyes, annoyed. "Careful, old woman. You're walking a thin line." I straightened my shoulders, forcing calm I didn't feel. "Then let's stop pretending. You want me in that hotel, don't you?"
"Fine.
"I'll go. But not like a prisoner. You need me alive, and I want to see for myself what you've done with my money." The scarred man tilted his head, studying me. For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the hum of the SUV's engine. Then, finally, he gave a short nod.
"Very well," he said.
"But don't think this makes you clever. It only saves you a beating." His men grabbed David and Ethan roughly, shoving them toward the SUV. Susan screamed, clinging to me until one of the men pulled her away. I kept my face hard, though inside I was shaking. This wasn't over. If they thought I'd walk willingly into their trap, they were wrong. As they forced us into the SUV, I looked back at the glowing hotel sign in the distance. Whatever waited inside those walls would decide everything. The SUV's engine growled as it carried us down the narrow road. My hands were bound in front of me with rough zip ties, and Susan sat pressed against me, trembling. David and Ethan were wedged on the opposite seat, guarded by 2 of the men in dark jackets. Another man sat up front, while the scarred leader lounged in the passenger seat like a king who already owned us. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the engine and the occasional cough from Ethan, who was still nursing his bruised ribs. I studied the scarred man's profile, trying to read him. His face was sharp, his eyes constantly scanning the road ahead, his scar tugging at his lip whenever he smirked. He was confident, too confident. That meant he thought we had no cards left to play. The hotel grew larger as we approached, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the night. From afar, it looked almost glamorous, but as we neared, the truth became clear. The paint was peeling, the windows cracked, and the parking lot empty except for a few black cars lined up like guards. They pulled us around the back, where the shadows swallowed the building. The SUV stopped, and the men yanked us out roughly. My knees buckled, but I forced myself to stand tall. If this was going to be my battlefield, I refused to enter it looking broken. The scarred man gestured toward a side door. Inside. They marched us down a dim hallway. The walls were stained, the carpet threadbare. This wasn't a hotel for guests. It was a front, a mask covering something rotten underneath. They shoved us into a wide room lit by a single flickering bulb. A long table stood in the middle, covered in papers, maps, and files. At the far end sat a man I didn't recognize, tall, balding, with cold eyes and fingers steepled beneath his chin. The scarred man inclined his head slightly toward him. Boss. So this was the true spider at the center of the web. The bald man's gaze slid to me. Margaret. At last. His voice was smooth, calculated. We've been waiting for you. Susan whimpered. David tried to step forward, but one of the guards shoved him back. Ethan clenched his fists, though he was in no shape to fight. I drew a deep breath and met the man's eyes. You stole from me. You tricked me. And you think I'll just sit here quietly while you ruin my family? The man smiled faintly.
No, Margaret.
We don't think you'll sit quietly. We think you'll cooperate, because you don't want her family hurt.
Do you?
He snapped his fingers. One of the guards tossed a folder onto the table. The bald man opened it, revealing photographs. I froze. Pictures of my house, my church, the grocery store, even the park where I sometimes sat on Sunday afternoons. Each one had a date scribbled at the corner. Susan gasped. They've been watching you for months. The bald man tapped the photos. We know everything about you. Where you go. Who you speak to. What you spend. Margaret, your whole life is written here. He leaned forward, his cold eyes glittering. Do you understand why we call you the key? I forced my voice to stay calm. Then tell me. Enough riddles. He gestured to the scarred man, who slid a document across the table toward me. I recognized it instantly. The same signature. My name, sprawled across the line. The bald man's voice was smooth as silk. You see? You already signed the transfer. The hotel, the accounts, the holdings, they belong to us now. But as long as you're alive and breathing, there's always a chance someone questions it. Which is why you'll sign another set tonight. Freely. On camera. And then, Margaret, all of this becomes legitimate. Susan cried out. No. You can't make her. The scarred man slammed the crowbar against the table, making her flinch. Quiet. I stared at the papers, my stomach churning. It was true. If I signed, it would all be over. They would own everything. My money, my home, my name. But if I refused, I looked at Susan, at David, at Ethan. They would pay the price. The bald man leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed. You see, Margaret, this was never about theft. This was about control. About legacy. Your family is weak. They broke themselves with greed. But you're strong. You hold the name, the reputation, the respect. And that's what we want. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then I straightened, my voice steady. If you want my legacy, you'll have to earn it. Because I don't sign papers for cowards hiding behind threats. The bald man's smile faded. He nodded to the scarred man. Teach her, he said coldly. Remind her what's at stake. The scarred man grabbed Susan by the arm, yanking her forward. She screamed, thrashing, but he lifted the crowbar high above her head. Stop, I shouted, my heart seizing. The scarred man's grin stretched wide. Sign or she bleeds. The crowbar hovered inches above Susan's head, the scarred man's grin cruel and hungry. Susan's terrified eyes locked with mine, begging me to do something. Wait, I shouted, my voice cracking with urgency. You want my signature, not her blood. The scarred man froze, though his grin never wavered. The bald man leaned forward, studying me like a hawk watching prey. Then prove it.
Pick up the pen.
Sign. A guard slid the papers and a pen toward me across the table. My hands trembled against the zip ties. Every fiber of my being screamed not to do it. Signing meant surrender. It meant losing everything my husband and I had built. But refusing meant Susan could die before my eyes. I forced myself to breathe. My mind raced. What could I do? What leverage did I have left? Slowly, I reached for the pen. The room grew silent, every eye fixed on me. The pen's weight felt heavier than iron, as though it carried the burden of generations. Good, the bald man purred. Very good. Show us that you understand. But just as the pen hovered above the paper, I stopped. I looked up and met his cold eyes. You made one mistake. He raised an eyebrow. Oh, you thought fear would break me, I said softly. Then louder, firm enough to make the walls feel it. But I don't break. Not for you. Not for anyone. And with that, I snapped the pen in half. Ink splattered across the documents, black stains smearing the page. The room erupted. The scarred man roared in fury, shoving Susan to the floor. David lunged forward instinctively, only to be slammed back by a guard's fist. Ethan tried to rise, but another man forced him down, pressing a boot against his chest. The bald man's calm demeanor cracked, his voice a hiss of rage. Do you realize what you've just done? I stood tall, my wrists aching against the ties, but my heart blazing.
Yes.
I've told you I will never willingly give you my name. You'll have to take it over my dead body. The bald man's eyes narrowed, his calm returning like a mask sliding back into place. He signaled to the scarred man. Then perhaps that's exactly what we'll do. Kill one of them in front of her. Remind her that defiance has a cost. The scarred man seized Ethan by the collar, dragging him to his feet. Susan screamed, trying to crawl toward her son, but the guards held her back. Ethan, bloodied and bruised, met my eyes. Don't give in, Grandma, he said, his voice shaking but brave. Don't you dare. My heart twisted. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself not to look away. If I crumbled now, it was over. The scarred man lifted the crowbar high, aiming at Ethan's skull. The guards tightened their grip on us, holding us down to watch. The bald man's voice was calm, almost gentle. This is your last chance, Margaret. Sign another copy, or watch him die. The crowbar glinted under the flickering bulb. Ethan closed his eyes, bracing for the blow. And then, a deafening bang shattered the air. The door to the room flew open, slamming against the wall. Armed men in black tactical gear stormed inside, rifles raised, voices booming. Federal agents. Nobody move. The scarred man froze mid-swing. The bald man's eyes widened for the first time, his calm mask cracking. Susan gasped. David stared in disbelief. Ethan opened his eyes, stunned.
And
I felt hope surge through me for the first time in weeks. Federal agents. Nobody move. The room exploded in chaos. Shouts, boots pounding against the floor, the clatter of rifles locking into position. The scarred man froze mid-swing, the crowbar inches above Ethan's head. The bald man's calm facade finally shattered, his cold eyes darting from the agents to me, calculating his next move. Susan sobbed with relief, clutching Ethan as one of the guards released her to draw his weapon. David stumbled back, wide-eyed, his face caught between shock and hope. The agents stormed in, fanning out with precision. Their leader barked orders. Hands up. Drop your weapons. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear flicker across the scarred man's face. He dropped the crowbar with a heavy clang, raising his hands. The other guards followed, though their hesitation showed they were ready to fight if given the signal. The bald man, however, didn't move. He stayed seated at the head of the table, his fingers steepled once more, his expression eerily calm despite the rifles aimed at him. "You're making a mistake," he said softly. "Do you know who I am?" The lead agent's voice was firm. "We know exactly who you are. Now stand up, slowly." But instead of obeying, the bald man leaned back in his chair, almost amused. "You've come too late. The papers are already signed. The money is already moving. You think you can stop this? You can't stop an empire." My stomach turned. He was lying, at least partly. I had destroyed the document in front of him. But what if there were others? Copies? Deals already set in motion? The agents didn't flinch. Two of them rushed forward, yanking him from his chair and slamming him to the ground. His smirk lingered, even as they cuffed his hands behind his back. "Take him out," the lead agent ordered. "Secure the building." The guards were dragged away one by one, their curses filling the air. The scarred man caught my eye as they pulled him toward the door. His grin had returned, a twisted promise. "This isn't over, Grandma," he hissed. "We'll finish this another night." I shivered, but held his stare. "We'll see about that." When the last of the men were hauled out, the room fell into silence except for the agent's radio chatter. Susan collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. David crouched beside Ethan, helping him sit upright. Ethan managed a weak smile through his bruises. "We made it, Grandma," he whispered. "We're still here." I hugged him tight, my heart aching with both pride and sorrow. He had been so brave, far braver than any boy his age should ever have to be. One of the agents approached me, pulling off his helmet. His face was weathered, his eyes tired but kind. "Ma'am, you're safe now. We've been tracking this group for months. Your hotel was their hub, front company, laundering money through false contracts. You're lucky you lasted this long." I frowned, still reeling. "But how did you know to come tonight?" He glanced at Ethan. "Your grandson. He found a way to send a message on the drive here. Simple text. One word. Help." It was enough. My eyes widened. I looked at Ethan, tears filling my eyes. "You saved us," I whispered. He gave me a faint grin. "Guess I'm not so useless after all." The agent's expression hardened. "But I'll be honest, ma'am, this isn't over. The bald man, the one you just saw, he's not the top. He answers to someone else. Someone bigger. If they want to do this badly, they'll try again." His words sank into me like ice. Bigger. Higher. More dangerous. My ordeal wasn't finished. It had only just shifted to a larger battlefield. Susan gripped my arm, panic returning to her face. "Mom, what does that mean? Are they coming back?" I steadied her trembling hands. "It means we prepare. We don't hide. We don't break. We fight smart." The agents began gathering evidence, files, photographs, laptops. Every scrap of paper on the table was sealed into bags. One of them lifted the ink-smeared contract I had destroyed. He glanced at me with a small nod of respect. "You fought back," he said. "Most people would have folded." I didn't feel strong. I felt exhausted, drained, like a candle burning down to its last inch. But I also felt something else. Resolve. If they wanted to call me the key, then I'd decide how to turn the lock. As we were escorted out of the hotel, I caught one last glimpse of the bald man being shoved into a separate vehicle. His smile was gone, but his eyes still gleamed with cold fire. He leaned close to one of the agents and muttered something I couldn't hear. But I knew what it was. A warning. A threat. The night air hit my face as we stepped outside, cool and sharp, the neon hotel sign flickering weakly overhead. We climbed into an agent's van, safe for the moment. Susan clung to me. Ethan leaned his head on my shoulder. David sat quietly, guilt etched deep into his face. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. Then, just as the van door shut, a deafening explosion rocked the night. The hotel behind us burst into flames, the blast lighting up the sky like a second sunrise. Windows shattered, debris rained down, and the ground trembled beneath us. The agents shouted, radios crackling with panic. And in the chaos, I realized with horror, they hadn't been trying to cover their tracks. They had been sending a message. The explosion rattled the van so violently, I thought it might flip. The windows lit up orange, and the roar of fire consumed the night. Susan screamed, covering her ears. Ethan pressed his face into my shoulder, trembling. David clutched the seat, his knuckles white. The agents inside the van scrambled to regain control. One of them shouted into his radio, "Hotel's gone. Repeat, hotel has been destroyed. We need backup now." Through the window, I watched the hotel collapse into itself, flames swallowing the old walls, sparks flying like angry stars. The neon sign sputtered, then vanished into the inferno. My stomach twisted. Every scrap of evidence the agents had missed, every document hidden deeper inside, all of it was gone in a single breath. Susan's voice cracked. "Mom, they destroyed everything. Everything." The lead agent cursed under his breath. They were one step ahead. Someone triggered explosives from the outside.
Clean sweep.
They don't leave trails. I stared at the burning ruins. The bald man had smiled for a reason. He'd known this would happen. I whispered. It wasn't just to cover their tracks. It was a warning. The agent met my eyes grimly. "You're right. That fire is meant for anyone watching. A message to the world. Cross them, and this is what happens." The van sped away from the chaos, but the firelight still burned in my vision. My heart pounded, not just from fear but from anger. They had taken my money, my trust, my peace, and now they wanted to erase me completely. Ethan lifted his head weakly. "Grandma, what happens now?" I held his hand tight. "Now we fight smarter. They think fear will silence us, but fear only makes us louder." David finally spoke, his voice raw. "This is my fault. If I hadn't gotten greedy." I cut him off sharply. "Enough. You made mistakes, yes. But right now, blame won't save us. What matters is what we do next." The van screeched to a stop at a safe house on the edge of town. A plain building, no signs, no lights. The agents hustled us inside quickly. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but calmer. They gave Ethan a chair and some water, Susan a blanket, David a cold glare that said they knew his part in all this. The lead agent sat across from me, his jaw set. "Listen carefully. Tonight proves something. This group is bigger, smarter, and more ruthless than we thought. We can protect you, but only if you cooperate fully. Everything you know, everything you remember, it could be the key to bringing them down." There it was again. That word.
The key.
I closed my eyes briefly. Maybe it was fate, maybe irony, but they were right. I was the key because I still had something they hadn't managed to take. My voice was steady when I spoke. If they want war, then war is what they'll get. But understand this, I don't play defense. I hit back. The agent studied me, then gave a slow nod. "Then you'd better be ready. Because after what happened tonight, they're coming for you harder than ever." The room fell silent. Susan shivered. Ethan squeezed my hand. David bowed his head. And deep inside, I felt it, the storm wasn't over. The fire was only the beginning. The safe house was quiet, but the silence was heavy. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the heater seemed to echo like a drumbeat. Susan huddled in the corner with a blanket pulled tightly around her shoulders, her eyes wide and restless. Ethan sat close to me, holding my hand as though it anchored him to the world. David hadn't spoken in nearly an hour, his head bowed, shame weighing on him like chains. I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't let me. The flames of the hotel still burned behind my eyes. I saw them in every blink, heard the crackling collapse of walls, smelled the bitter smoke. And beneath it all, I heard the scarred man's voice. "This isn't over, Grandma. We'll finish this another night." The lead agent, his name was Marshall, entered the room, carrying a folder thick with documents. He set it on the table, his face grim. "Margaret," he said softly, "we need to talk." I nodded, motioning for him to sit. Susan looked up nervously. Ethan leaned closer, and even David lifted his head. Marshall opened the folder. Inside were photographs, maps, and printed reports. He spread them out like pieces of a puzzle. We've been tracking this organization for months. The bald man, his name's Richard Kane. On paper, he's a businessman. In reality, he runs a network laundering millions through properties like that hotel. I swallowed hard. And the scarred one? Marshall's jaw tightened. Vincent Rourke. Ex-military, dishonorably discharged. He handles enforcement, threats, intimidation, violence. The scar? He got it in a prison fight years back. He wears it like a badge now. The names felt heavy in my mouth. Richard Kane, Vincent Rourke. They weren't just shadows anymore. They were flesh and blood. And they had made me their target. Marshall tapped a map. Red circles dotted several states. The hotel wasn't the only front. There are others. Restaurants, motels, storage facilities. All under fake names. All feeding money into Kane's empire. Susan's voice trembled. But the hotel was ours. My mother's money. Marshall raised a hand.
Yes.
That's why they chose it. Margaret's reputation made it look clean. Legitimate. Without her, they lose credibility. He looked at me squarely. They weren't lying when they called you the key. I sat back, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. For weeks, I had been on the run, reacting to every blow, barely keeping my family alive. But now, the truth was clearer than it had ever been. I wasn't just their victim. I was their weapon. And if they wanted to use me, I would turn that weapon back on them. I leaned forward, my voice steady. You said they're bigger than we thought. Then we need to think bigger too. What's their weakness? Marshall hesitated, studying me. Ma'am, with respect, this isn't your fight. I cut him off sharply. Don't tell me it's not my fight. They burn my money, my hotel, my family's peace. They dragged us through fire and glass. If you think I'll sit back and knit blankets while you handle it, you don't know me. His lips pressed into a thin line. Then slowly he nodded. Fair enough. Their weakness is greed. They expand too fast, too wide. They cut corners, leave holes. We've been trying to follow the money, but it's like chasing smoke. Ethan spoke suddenly, his voice quiet but clear. Then maybe we don't chase it. Maybe we lead it. All eyes turned to him. His cheeks flushed, but he pressed on. If Grandma's the key, then we use her like bait. We make them think she's still willing to sign something. Fake contracts. Fake deals. Lure them out. Susan gasped.
No.
That's too dangerous. You can't use her like. I squeezed Ethan's hand gently. No, he's right. My voice was calm, but inside, my heart raced. If they want me, then let's give them me. But on my terms. Marshall rubbed his temples. You're talking about a sting operation. You realize what you're suggesting? They'll try to kill you the second they suspect it's a setup. I nodded. Then we make sure they don't suspect. David finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Mom, this could get you killed. I turned to him. David, they've already tried. And they'll try again. I'd rather risk dying on my feet than spend the rest of my days hiding in fear. The room went silent. Marshall studied me for a long moment, then exhaled slowly.
All right.
If we do this, we do it my way. Controlled.
Watched.
Every second monitored. One mistake, and they'll tear you apart. Susan shook her head in disbelief. Mom, please don't. But I placed a hand on her cheek, steady and firm. Susan, listen to me. I've been running my whole life from grief, from guilt, from mistakes. No more. This ends with me. Ethan's eyes shone with pride. Grandma, you're braver than all of us. I smiled faintly, though my chest ached with fear.
No, sweetheart.
I'm just tired of cowards thinking they can break me. Marshall began gathering the papers. I'll prepare the details. But Margaret, once we start, there's no turning back. I looked at the flames still burning in my memory, at the scarred grin of Vincent Rourke, at the cold smirk of Richard Kane. And I whispered, then let's start. Just as I spoke, The phone on the safe house wall rang. Everyone froze. Marshall grabbed it, pressing it to his ear. His face went pale. He hung up slowly, his voice grim. "They know you're here." The moment I stepped back inside, I locked eyes with Carter. He didn't need me to explain. The fear on my face said it all. "They know," I whispered. The scarred man was just outside. He showed me a photo of Ethan taken from here. The room erupted. Susan dropped her blanket and rushed to Ethan, clutching him like she could shield him with her arms alone. David stood, fists clenched, eyes darting to every corner as if the walls themselves might cave in. Carter swore under his breath and barked orders into his radio. "Evacuate protocol.
Now."
We've been compromised. But deep down, I knew it was too late. If the scarred man had been bold enough to sit across the street and watch, then he had already set the trap. We weren't escaping, we were walking straight into his game. The agent scrambled, grabbing files, weapons, and gear. Susan pleaded. "Mom, what if we don't make it? What if?" "Quiet," I said firmly. "We don't give them the satisfaction of hearing fear in our voices." Ethan lifted his chin, his small voice trembling but brave. "Grandma's right. If they want us, they'll have to fight for us." For a moment, pride swelled in my chest. That boy had more courage than men twice his age. But then the lights flickered.
Once. Twice.
And went out. The safe house plunged into darkness. Silence pressed against us, broken only by Susan's sharp gasp. Then came the sound. Heavy footsteps outside, circling. A hand rattling the door. A low, taunting whistle we all recognized. The scarred man. Carter cocked his weapon, signaling his team into defensive positions. "Stay behind us. Do not move until I say." I held Ethan close, my heart hammering. Susan clung to David, both of them trembling. The whistle grew louder, closer, until it seemed to seep through the very walls. And then, bang! The front door exploded inward, splinters flying, smoke pouring into the room. Figures in black masks stormed inside, weapons raised. Carter shouted, "Ambush!" The scarred man stepped through the smoke, crowbar in hand, his grin wide and merciless. His eyes landed on me. "Game over, Grandma." The scarred man's grin widened as his men stormed the room. Carter's agents fired back, the crack of gunfire rattling the walls. Susan screamed, shielding Ethan, while David froze, torn between terror and regret. I stood tall, no longer trembling. "You took my money, my peace, and nearly my family," I said, my voice steady even in chaos. "But you forgot one thing. You can't break me." The scarred man swung the crowbar toward me, only for a single shot to echo. He staggered, shock flashing in his eyes, before collapsing at my feet. Carter lowered his smoking weapon. "It's over." The masked men fled, swallowed by the night. The room fell silent, save for Susan's sobs of relief and Ethan's whispered, "We made it." I knelt, taking Ethan's hand. "Yes, we did. And we'll never let fear own us again." Susan hugged me tight, tears soaking my shoulder. Even David, humbled and broken, fell to his knees. "I'm sorry, Mom. I nearly lost us everything." I cupped his face. "Greed destroys, David. But repentance heals. Remember that." Later, as dawn broke, I looked out at the horizon. The hotel was gone, the money too, but my family was alive. That was wealth no thief could ever steal. So, dear viewers, my name is Margaret, and I've learned this. Stand firm against those who try to take your dignity. No matter your age, your strength can shake the world. Thank you for watching my story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification button for more stories like this. Tell me from which part of the country you're watching. I'd love to know. And remember, courage is the richest legacy we leave behind.